This is Nan McKay. We are interviewing trailblazers who have pivoted away from their former career to another venture by creating a business. Our guest today is Joanna Bloor. Joanna, take us on your pivot journey. Where were you? Where are you now? And why did you decide to change?
Well, I will try and give you the short version, but I will start by saying I have been a professional pivoter, for lack of a better term, since I was probably a teenager. So I'm actually going to start the story there. I was born and raised in the UK. And just to give people a bit of a visual, I went to a school that could only be described as like Hogwarts without boys or magic. And at 15 years old, moved to Central Texas with not all of my family, but part of my family, and got enrolled in a school that could only be described as like Friday Night Lights. And the volume of surprises and lessons and all of those sorts of things really woke me up at a very important point in my life to the idea that the future was ambiguous and the rules were made not to be, well, certainly to be questioned. That really the only ones that were truly important were the be a nice person, don't do illegal things and all that. And relationships were everything. And it meant I started very young with this whole idea of breaking the rules and coloring outside the lines. That said, I had a really fantastic, I had an early career, which we won't talk about, but a 25-year run in the startup.com world. My career took off when I went to go work for a little company at the time called City Search back in 1995, which was one of the very first .com companies. I see you nodding that because you've been around a long time that you actually remember who they are. Lots of people, I'm like, they were Yelp before Yelp existed. And I had an amazing career working for multiple startups. I got to help build Ticketmaster and Cars.com and CNET and OpenTable and most recently Pandora. And really had a fantastic career and was working in kind of semi-untraditional corporate America, but certainly corporate America. And at the time was known for being an executive who knew more about the ad technology and digital media industry than a normal person should know. And I found myself at Pandora, the music company, during their hockey stick moment. And because of where I was professionally, what was happening with the company and the leadership at the company, was basically given my dream job. I was given not only the resources to build the vision of what I truly wanted to build in the industry, but also the encouragement and the people and all of the things. And so when my journey at Pandora came to an end, I looked at it and I was like, gosh, if I do this again, it will never measure up. And so if it doesn't matter if I am an expert in this, if I try to recreate what has happened here, I will always mourn what was. And I know that when I am working on anything, there's this beautiful balance of, am I bringing all of my tools and expertise to the table, and is the thing that I'm thinking about going to matter? But also, am I excited and curious about what it is I'm going to do? And finding that space where both existed was really important. And I will also say that I was always kind of a baby entrepreneur, even as a little kid. My mother laughs because I got into fantastic trouble when I was about 6 for bartering snails on the playground area for like colored pencils and things like that. So I think the entrepreneur was already in there. And so when I left Pandora, I said, well, hang on a second. If doing what I was doing before is actually going to break my heart a little bit because it's never going to be quite as amazing, maybe it's time to rethink who you want to be and what it is you want to do. And so I gave myself the gift of 6 months. And one of my, I call them ambition guides, but technically one of my advisors, mentors, sponsors said, you should take a year off. And I was like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. It has to be more. He tried to do a year. I gave myself 6 months, and I experimented for 6 months. And in the process of experimenting, found the path, literally. Or it found me, I'm not sure which I know sounds ridiculous and magical and all of that. But as much as I am a mathematician and a scientist and a technologist, I also believe in the woo, and the combination of two came together. And I did that, it'll be 6 years ago this summer. And I haven't actually even got offered a job last week. I had somebody who was like, I want to rescue you from entrepreneurship and put you back in a company. And for about 24 hours, I went, oh, wait, what? It was fantastically flattering. But he doesn't know I'm going to say no yet, because there's a whole other thing that I've got going on. But I realized that there's no way I'm stepping off this path now. I'm on it.
Would you consider this path or the entrepreneurship in your business right now to be a traditional or lifestyle entrepreneur?
Well, I'm going to be difficult. Neither. As you've probably already figured out, I'm an endless, as I said, I'm a professional pivoter. I experiment constantly. I have seen, because of the experiences I've had, I've absolutely seen the entrepreneurial journey that we all hear about in the news. Like, I got to work with some of the most amazing founders. I've been through 4 IPOs with companies, which some of my finance friends are all like, we should have paid attention to where you were working, because clearly you made some good choices. So I really understand what that journey of entrepreneurship looks like. But because the relationships matter conversation, I've also had the delight of getting to be really involved with the entrepreneurs organization and all of the EO members, who are a fantastically different kind of entrepreneur. And a lot of them you would call not the traditional entrepreneur of the startup and get funding and all that, but they bootstrap. And I've seen both. And my DNA is of the traditional entrepreneur with venture capital and all of those sorts of things. And yet I really understand this other kind of entrepreneur. And so I've played in both pools. And because I'm a bit of an experimenter, I optimize a little bit for both. I heard a beautiful phrase the other day where somebody said that they were results oriented, but life supporting. And I was like, I really like that idea. I'm gonna do that game. And so when I think about the path that I'm on and the journey that I'm on, while I'm always keeping an ear to the ground to the traditional path, but then also giving myself permission to keep it a lifestyle business. And I see, for the business we're doing, I actually see both opportunities ahead of me. And instead of making the decision today, which who knows, might not be the right idea, but instead of making the decision today, I'm actually waiting to see where both the business leads and where my customers lead me, because they inevitably are my guideposts. And so I'm going to punt on that question and say TBD.
Well, we'll revisit it again in, say, 5 years.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit more about your business. And I'm thinking things like, what do you do? Do you work remotely? Is it an online business? That kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, the irony in your question is I actually help people answer the question, what do you do? And many other parts of it. So let me explain a little bit, because what I do is, like anybody's business, a little bit different. And I'm actually going to use you as a bit of a narrative here. So when you think about you as a working person in the working world, and when I say you, it is mostly, I would say, knowledge workers in that working world. You think about who they are. And I I describe them and I say there is this concept of the now you. And the now you is a combination of your skills, what you've done, your accomplishments, where you are today. Now you is brilliant and fantastic. The question I always have is, who then is the future you? Who is that? Who could you be? What is all of that? And this concept of the future you is a combination of your potential, your possibilities, but ultimately it is who you will be tomorrow. Here's the thing though, when you think about who you are in the working world and what value you bring to the table, you are in essence renting a subscription to the future you to your employer or to your customers if you're an entrepreneur. And we are in a world where when we talk about who that is, we only ever talk about the past you and the now you. We talk about our skills, what we've done, our accomplishments, and all we're going to do today. But people choose the future you. Every decision made about you is made in a room that you are not in. And the thing that they are choosing is, who are you going to be tomorrow? Are there going to be shenanigans that I want to play with? All of those sorts of things. And so I sit here and say, well, hang on a second. Why, in this crazy world that we live in, if we are obsessing around how to explain the value of a pencil, are we not doing the same for human beings? And that's the work we do, which is why I call myself a potentialist and aspiring fairy godmother, which we can pull into that. And so that's what the business does, is we work with individuals and or teams to talk about this idea of potentialism and the future you and how it transforms how you talk about yourself in a way to make it unique and bold and all of those, but then also transforms how teams work together. And I use that because my past at all of these startups with their hockey stick moments, like I had a team that went from 30 to 400 in 3.5 years, and helping them figure out who it is they needed to be in the future was not only beneficial to them, but as the leader of the organization, I was like, I need you all to move faster and stop worrying about your title and stop worrying about this. I just need you to bring your brilliant brain to the table, and learned how to teach that. So I now teach that broadly, and what it means kind of on the logistics of the business, so that people can go, well, hang on a second, how do you even do that? Up until the pandemic, it meant that I showed up at conferences and events and companies, and I have been described as a combination of like Bette Midler meets Tony Robbins with a little splash of Gene Roddenberry. Which is kind of an interesting combination, but I bring all three of those characters to the table. And I used to perform at conferences because what I am known for doing is actually plucking people out of the audience and giving them, like the fairy godmother does with Cinderella, a transformation on stage. But then ultimately teaching people how to talk about themselves in this future you and potential language. And then how does that apply within companies? And so I used to be a big road warrior princess, and my team, while we are all remote, because when I sit here and say I chose results-oriented, lifestyle friendly, I also wanted to choose that for the team that works with me. And so we have lots of moms who work part-time because it supports their lifestyle. We always have. We have some people who are in college, some people who this is their job after their big job. Like, who you are and what you are ambitious for is actually one of the first questions I ask when you come work for the team. But how do we structure that has never been the 40-hour show up in a workplace, et cetera, et cetera. Might that happen in the future? Maybe, probably not. The pandemic came along and no one was inviting anybody anywhere. And so over last year, we went back to the fundamentals and completely rebuilt the company from the ground up. And now you're going to have to drag me kicking and screaming from my virtual studio that we have created here, because I have found that this environment actually supports all of our choices, not only for me, but for the people that I work with. in a much better way. So while yes, absolutely, I show up periodically, I'm actually heading down to LA in a couple of weeks to keynote at an event, finally in person. And I do love that. But everything we do is remote. And I am, as the Gene Roddenberry technologist part of my brain has been absolutely off the chart insane about the new technologies that are emerging and how to leverage them and what to do with them and how to create digital worlds that not only educate and help people build a better future for themselves, but also transform how they think. You know, I have a virtual reality headset that I play with, and I'm like, what could we do here? I think what is happening just in this environment is really changing the world. And so we're always playing in that space. So we are predominantly a virtual company and also predominantly a company where we all kind of make up our own hours. It's what I think is kind of the company of the future, but it's allowed for the environment and the product that we sell. So, you know, if you're going to make fantastic bread for a living, maybe a different story, but certainly for me, we've been able to structure it that way.
So because you are working primarily online, share one of the best strategies or tactics that really is working for you right now to grow your business online. What kind of marketing are you doing differently? What kind of approach and sales approach have you got that you're doing differently? Any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I have so much to say here that will not be in a one single thing, because the reality is my business for 25 years before this was marketing and selling things online, right? It is the world I have come from. And so if people ask me about that, my head kind of goes, because there's so much to do here. But my advice to anybody is technology is a tool. And just because it's a tool and it's out there, doesn't mean you have to use it. I always sit down and say, okay, who are the people who are already buying me and my services and whatever it is I'm doing? And sit here and say, like, what do they need and what are they all about? And then start experimenting. So here's how I look at the tools in the online marketing, because I don't do, well, with the exception of I'm fairly active on both Twitter and LinkedIn because it is right for my business. I don't follow a lot of the rules. I look at it and I say, okay, what does this set of customers need? What are they responding to? How are they reacting? Because if they reacted to me this way without marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, well, then maybe I will attract more people like that who react the same way. Because I fundamentally believe that not only do we as entrepreneurs offer our products and services to people, but getting really clear about who do you want to have choose you is equally important. And so all of I should say, our strategies are based on, well, gosh, we want more customers that look and sound like this. And what did they react to? And how do we build that? But we do it in a very, very experimental way. I am, as my startup junkiness means that we do everything in 90-day sprints. I don't go all in on one decision. We do an experiment and we go, what happened? Did we like it? Was it easy for us? Was it easy for them? Did we see the results we were hoping for? Did we learn anything from this? Did this make anybody upset? Did this make anybody super happy? And did it ultimately surprise and delight people along the way? And if it doesn't come out with, well, that was actually easy and fun for us, and it was easy and fun for our customers, we don't do it again. And so it's not about, oh, if you do this one thing, then you're going to make it happen, because we live in a world where the choices are so infinite. And if you are using everybody else's playbook, then the only thing people can compare on is price. And I don't think that's a race to the bottom for everybody. It means that you are cutting value for your customer, and you're cutting value for you. And then you get on that treadmill of more. And to your question earlier about, do I want to be a traditional entrepreneur or a lifestyle entrepreneur? It's which treadmill, like there are different treadmills, right? And I don't actually sign up for this growth at all costs, hustle, hustle, hustle path. I'm like, it needs to be fun for both people. And what it means is I would say that 98% of our business is referral. And because of that, it is because I think fundamentally, I'm like, how do I make it easy for them? How do I make it easy for us? And how do I make it fun for both of us? Because if it's not that, then it becomes a chore and you become a slave to the machine as opposed to helping the machine work for everybody.
I think one of the hardest things to figure out is what do your customers like and not like, and who are your customers? For instance, I know we have Google Analytics, and I know we have some way of kind of anonymously figuring this out. But even if you could figure out the analytics part, and I'd like you to talk about that, but on the other side, how do you really figure out whether people like a particular thing you're trying?
Oh my goodness. Well, so first of all, like, I know that everyone's like, oh, you need to SEO optimize and you should have Google Analytics and you should have an Instagram thing, all of the things, right? Why? Because if you are optimizing for that, you are optimizing for Google. I optimize nothing for Google because 98% of my customers come through referral. I don't need them to go there. And so, and I'm we're a pretty small, pretty lean operation. We don't have I don't have a guy who can focus on SEO. I'm like, no, don't need any of that. Now, when I was at Pandora, did we have all of that? 100%, totally. Because it was big, we were going from 100 million to $1 billion in revenue. We needed all of that because it was going to scale. If you are starting a business, or I would say in your first $1 million, like figure out when it is right for you to put in some of these things. Because the beauty of this digital online world is you can build version 1.0 of who you are and what you're about and what you're doing. You don't have to put any of that stuff in there. And you can see what happens through human conversation. And then as you're seeing what patterns emerge, what things happen, then version maybe 3.0 of your website can have Google Analytics and all of these sorts of things. Just because you have the data doesn't actually mean it's the right information. And so this is the advice I give to anybody who's first starting out. I'm like, if you really need to get good at two things at the beginning, because everything else you can outsource. One is being able to talk to your customers about what they like and what they don't like, and not be afraid to ask those questions and build the relationship so they can give you the honest answers. And then two, learning how to sell you and your product. Because if you don't really study how to sell both of those things, because somebody might be buying scrunchies, you're going to get all sorts of things off my desk at some point, but they buy you as much as they buy your product, especially in this day and age. And being good at learning how to sell both concurrently is critically, critically important. And I know lots of people are like, oh, I don't like selling, ick. And I sit here and I go, look, it's time to reframe that language too, is the best salespeople don't sell, they teach. Because when you teach, you're generous to whatever the client needs. And when you teach, you're actually empowering rather than taking. And so learning how to, and if you're a teacher, nobody would expect a teacher to teach a class without understanding how the students are going to react. No teacher. And so I'm like, put your teacher mind hat on and learn how to teach about you and your product, learn how to talk to your students of you. And that's going to give you insight into what works, what doesn't, what do they like. And as I said, I'm also like a teacher, well, more like a scientist, a huge experimenter. Like we have, and I will actually say, I'm a big fan of the paid experiment. I will have, and my process is sell the experiment, do the experiment, learn from it, and then decide. But we have, I think, we had a couple of performances last week where I was talking about the future you, and we offered an experiment to all of the audience members. We have about 20 people going through a 5-day experiment around a product that we're like, this could have some legs. And we ran the experiment last week with a different group. And so far, we're seeing about a 25% conversion on this experiment. I'm like, this is a really good data point. Has nothing to do with Google Analytics, has to do with what is our hope for our customers and where do we want to deliver on results.
What advice do you have for those businesses that cannot tie it down to a customer, that you can discuss their likes and dislikes? So many of the businesses today are, you get the email, you hope you get the email, and you might not even get that. So other than social media, is there a way to figure out what their likes and dislikes are?
Well, so I'm going to disagree vehemently that you can't tie it down to customer. Can you give me a little bit more of a tangible example? Because I have reached out personally to so many people who've engaged with me on LinkedIn and asked and said, hey, do you mind if we hop on the phone and have a real conversation? And if they are a fan of you and what you're doing, they're almost excited to have that conversation, to be part of the development of your future products and services. Okay, I'm trying to think where that doesn't work, because
no, what I'm hearing you say, and it's interesting, what I'm hearing you say is, let's pick a social media, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever you're picking, and drill down in a sense to the people who are your followers in essence, if you're friends or you know, whatever that scheme is for that particular social media. But do it through social media, but do it on a one-to-one basis to talk to them directly with that next level.
Yeah. Especially if you're in that, like, again, as you get really big and all of the things, well, then you can actually hire research teams and do all sorts of things. But when you're in that early stage and you're an experimental, like having those human conversations is important. It doesn't actually even need to be you. And you can see, especially, this is where the data can be helpful. Like I look at LinkedIn as an example because I work, like all of my clients are people in the knowledge worker world. So it's a very important platform to me. I absolutely aware of a handful of people who comment and like everything. You think I'm going to talk to them about what they think? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm trying to think of another example of where I am fearless about asking people, what do they think? Probably one of the most powerful questions I heard the other day that I now actually use in my practice is when I'm working with somebody, if like, they don't necessarily have to work with me directly, but if I'm working with somebody directly, even if they are a brand new customer, or even if I'm on a prospecting conversation, at the end of the conversation, because I will be generous in that conversation with ideas and concepts, I will always say at the end, like, what part of this conversation was most helpful to you today? And that simple question will immediately give you what's stuck in their head. Because I come back to what I'm known for saying, which is every decision made about you and your opportunities is made in a room that you're not in. While it is about you, it is not about you or your product at all. It's about what do the people in the room think? And so the more you ask that question, what landed for you? What did you like? My other favorite question, by the way, I never ask the question, what do you think? Because what do you think opens the door for criticism. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to build your company, they're basically telling you your baby is ugly. And you want to talk about what is the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur is when somebody calls your baby ugly, you were like, no, it is not. And then you go into confidence spiral of crazy. FYI, if you are thinking of doing this, I have been on my own for 6 years. I still go, oh, have I lost my mind? What am I doing? I don't know what I'm talking about, to this day. Not all the time, and it happened a lot at the beginning, but yeah, that happens. And now I went on a whole tangent. Oh, this conversation in the room that you're not in. My favorite question to ask people when you're telling them a story, explaining something, is saying, what did you hear? Because when you ask the question, what did you hear? You actually get two things. One, you find out immediately whether the story you were trying to tell actually landed. And so often, because how I play the story in my movie mind, because I have been in the weeds of product to me for so long, is going to be spectacularly different from how the movie is playing out in somebody else's mind. Very fast feedback. Here's the second thing that happens, which is a bonus point. You remember how I said, and I'm going to say it again, every decision made about you is made in the room that you're not in? You just gave somebody who is already curious about you a practice session on how to talk about why you are uniquely awesome, or how your product is uniquely awesome. We forget things because we get so much input. Once we say something out loud, we remember. It's the same reason when somebody says, oh, you need to remember how to say somebody's name, that they say it 3 or 4 times the first time you meet them, and you will never forget their name, right? It's the same reason that if I asked you to draw a picture of McDonald's Golden Arches, you do a pretty good job because you have seen it over and over again. And it tells the story of tasty French fries and clean restrooms, right? That's what the Golden Arches tell you the story of. You do not go to McDonald's because you want a full meal. You go to McDonald's because you need a bathroom. Let's be real here. And then you're all like, well, now I'm here. I need to have the tasty French fries, etc. Right? Same thing for any product. So if I was going to tell you the story of this scrunchie, which I will not, my question at the end would be, what did you hear? And that's going to give you fantastically more insight into the stories people are telling about you and your product in the room that you're not in.
That's so interesting. I'm curious, how did you know what you wanted to do? Did you, when you started your business, did you kind of do that right away, or how'd you decide?
Oh, I didn't. I know everybody's all like, you're supposed to have that lightning bolt to your head. Did not happen for me. So I mentioned at the beginning, I had a mentor, advisor, friend who basically was like, take a year off and do nothing because you can. And so I took 6 months off, but because, as you can tell, I have a lot of energy, I was all like, well, I can't do nothing. I won't build a business, but I'm going to do something. And I was like, I literally will not go out and look for another job. I will goof off. And so I was like, well, what do I want to learn while I'm on this 6-month hiatus? And at the time, I was super interested in podcasting. It was a very early platform. And being a former Pandora team member, I was all like, well, this audio platform is interesting. I thought maybe there's something here. I was also fascinated in 3D printing as a technology. It was super early days there. And I was like, what is this thing? And I don't get how, what would you want to 3D print? I don't even understand. At the time, I needed to lose some weight because I had eaten my feelings all the way through Pandora and needed to get a little stronger and fitter. And I was not looking so great. So a little vanity. And so I found a company because I think the scale is a horrible, terrible machine and completely makes me feel sad every day of my life. As you can see, I optimized for joy. I was like, you know what? I still need to measure my results on a weight loss thing, but there's this company that will literally 3D print me. And I was like, why don't I do a podcast about 3D printing myself and helping myself lose weight? Because I said, I have what I like to self-describe reverse body dysmorphia. I think I look like Cindy Crawford. I do not. And so when I see a plate of cookies, I'm like, of course I can have a cookie. My ass is not that big. And then if you walk around with a little miniature 3D printed copy of your ass, you sure do see what size it is. And so I was like, great, I'm going to create a podcast. I called it 3D Lila. because Lila stands for Latent Life Athlete. I had the 3D printing thing. I did all the things. And in my podcast, I was like, well, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to learn about 3D printing. So I started interviewing experts in 3D printing and health technologies, and then talked a little bit about my journey. So I got to talk to the foremost expert on 3D printed food because I asked. I got to talk to all sorts of technology companies. I actually got free product because I helped out one of the companies because they were doing a 3D mirror scanning thing, which was similar. And most of them were like, oh my God, Joanna, you're hilarious. And all of these things. And then that pivot moment happened, that potential moment. We all have them. That moment when suddenly you're like, oh, hang on a second, I'm going down a different path. I got a call from the TED organization, and they reached out and said, we've heard about your project and we think it's very TED-esque and amusing and delightful. And would you be interested in being one of the comedic speakers at the TED conference next spring? Yeah. And I was like, literally was like, wait, what? How did this happen? Me? All of the things. And I will also say that while they said that, the next 6 months were an audition process for every 2 weeks, all the way up until the night before the conference opened. They were actually cutting people at that point, which also blew my mind. It was an amazing, amazing experience. But I went on stage and talked about my 3D printed selves in front of the TED audience and how I have issues around my weight, which was funny and self-deprecating and fun and all of those things. But getting to get curated by the TED organization was a gift. But what I learned at TED is that while the conference, and I don't know if any of the listeners have been, the secret of the TED events is, yes, the speakers are phenomenal and amazing, but it's actually the people who are standing in line that you show up for. It's why I continue to show up, because you will find yourself all of a sudden, and these are all true experiences for me, sitting in an area of the conference having tea with Al Gore, or standing in line in a bookstore and realizing that Shonda Rhimes is standing right in front of you, or meeting a guy who in his own story was a D student in high school, was in a terrible car accident and lost both his legs above the knee, and is now the inventor of biometric artificial limbs, which means your brain can actually control artificial limbs. And he's got a PhD and is just one of the most remarkable people. You'll meet a person who found a new dinosaur, which when I said to him, like, what do you do? He was like, I found a new dinosaur. And I was like, of course you did. Unbelievably mind-expanding experience. And while I was there, I was like, wow, this path to who you could be and what you're all about and how you introduce yourself is actually critically important. And I was standing in line with a Microsoft executive. She knows I tell this story quite a bit. She was no slouch herself. She was there for the launch of HoloLens, which was their augmented reality glasses, and had been at Microsoft for a long time. And so I said to her, I was like, well, so if I was to ask you who you are and what you're all about, what would you say? And she looked at me and she goes, I don't know, I guess I'd call myself Microsoft girl. And I was like, well, that is super boring and you should do something about that. Fortunately, like you, she laughed and we had a whole conversation about this whole idea, of which I had no framework for, of how do you teach people who you are and what you're all about? 6 weeks later, she called me up and she said, you know what, Joanna, TED was amazing, but this was the conversation that has stuck with me. And I would love you to come up to Redmond and talk to my team about this whole idea of how do you introduce yourself. And at the time I was like, new friend, awesome. I was like, yeah, absolutely, no problem, totally. And I thought I was doing her a favor. And she goes, well, can you send me a proposal? And I went, yes, absolutely. I had nothing. And she goes, well, you have a program, right? And I was like, 100%, totally do. I had nothing. She now knows this. I had nothing. And I said, give me 24 hours and I'll get something back to you. And so I pulled up a Google Doc, blank Google document, and then I searched speaking contract on the internet. And I found one and I was like, okay, I need to customize this. And I made my own. And I was like, well, I don't know how she's going to pay me, but maybe I need to go research with California how to open an LLC, because at least I need that. And I did the minimum to do that. And I had, I think, like 4 weeks to get the content ready. And I spent the next 4 weeks building the program. And I showed up in Redmond with my materials and everything I thought I needed. And I did not go fancy. It was all bootstrap and it was all just me. And I showed up there and I had 40 people in the room. And we were presenting and we were talking to it. And that's when I had my second potential moment. Which I had no idea it was going to be quite so. TED was a biggie. This one was bigger. And as I was trying to help people understand that, you know, when you're teaching people about the future you, while it's about you, it's not you. So you have to find this beautiful place with the language that is anchored in authenticity, because none of us like an inauthentic person, but also appearance, because you are unique and valuable, and you do need to understand that you are being chosen. And one of the people in the front row was clearly struggling. And so I turned to her, and I will never forget, we're still friends today. I said, you know, Kathy, clearly you're struggling with this idea. What seems to be the problem? She goes, well, I don't know why I am uniquely awesome. And I was like, oh, don't be silly. Of course you are. Everybody is. And I said, talk to me for a second. And we started chit-chatting backwards and forwards. And I couldn't not hear why she was awesome. And so I said, Kathy, stop. I said, this is why you're awesome. And then I told her in a way that was bold and compelling and taught people about her rather than told people about her. She subsequently burst into tears. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she goes, no, you don't understand. Nobody's actually been able to put words into how to describe me. And I was like, oh, that's wonderful. And by this point, the room was pin drop quiet. And somebody in the back goes, that was amazing. Can you do it again? And I was like, I don't know, experimental me. Why don't we give it a try? I ended up doing 20 transformations on the spot. And in the process, realized that my years of experience, although I didn't have the language then, I do now, but my years of experience in the startup world of creating and building and marketing products that people did not understand, and how to do that, because everything I have sold to date has been a thing that people are like, what are you talking about? My 25 years of doing that every day meant I have a really unique skill set. And it means that I have now done thousands of transformations with people. And that's just the quick shush, and this is why I call myself the fairy godmother, because while I am a teacher of the concepts of future you and potentialism, once you understand that you need to teach that, you then need somebody to help you become that. And like Cinderella, when the fairy godmother met her, she did not talk about, oh, you know, if you learned how to talk to your crazy boss a little better, maybe she'd be a little less psycho, aka the stepmother. She also did not say, you know, if you met your colleagues at their level, maybe they would help you with their work, aka the sisters. She said, no, she was like, whatever about the past your ambition is to go to the ball. The whole marrying the prince and living happily ever after was just a bonus for later, right? She just wanted to go to the ball and dance. There was no aspirations beyond that. And she said, okay, sweetie, if you show up at the front gate in this sad little outfit, no fly ride, they are not even going to let you on the property, let alone all the way to the ballroom floor. You've got about 1,000 people before you get to the ballroom that need to say yes to the future you. So we are going to judge this situation and make sure that when you show up, they're like, yes, of course you should be here. Yes, of course you should be here. Yes, of course you should be here. And then when you get to the ballroom floor, just getting in the ballroom isn't good enough for me. I want you to have the confidence because of how you are put together. And I am not talking about, are you wearing the right color shirt? I'm talking about the story you tell yourself about your value so that you can walk down the big staircase. Because if you go in a side door and say, oh, I made it in the room, that's not good enough. People need to see you to choose you. And I want you to have the confidence to be seen. And so that's what I do when I come back and say, I'm the fairy godmother, and come in and say, look, we're going to judge this. And then we are going to make sure you know how to talk about the future you, because when both of those happen, then people choose you for who you are and what you're about. And that is what I get to do all day. Now, I have a whole other narrative, and of course it's not on my desk, about how the glass slipper was actually the first example of corporate swag. Because if you think about it, the shoe was the only thing that didn't vanish. And it had 3 jobs. One, when the prince went back into the ballroom and had lots of other lady people to choose from, he didn't, because he had the shoe. When he woke up the next morning, so think about that within the workplace. If you've got lots of candidates, you want to have something to remind them why you are better than all of the other candidates. Your interview doesn't need to be the only thing. When the prince got up the next morning and went to his boss, aka his parents, and said, oh, I think I found the one. He had the shoe to remind him how to talk about why Cinderella was uniquely awesome. And the shoe became the tool that he used to actually find her at the end of the day. So Cinderella's slipper was actually corporate swag, as opposed to a silly trinket left on the stairs by accident.
Do you do these transformations through businesses, or do you do them through organizations or groups? Or
all of the above. Yeah, people come to me because they have seen me perform somewhere or have heard about me through one of their friends. And I do individuals. And it's not just, it's people who are either stuck or bored in some way, shape, or form, and or recognize that the people who are making the decisions in the room that they're not in can't either see them or aren't choosing them for who they are. So this could be somebody. I'm talking to a woman later today who is like, look, I have so much ambition in my company and I don't know how to help them see that. And so we're working on that. Lots of people are looking jobs. Majority of my work is actually coming and working with companies because, when you think about when you are the entrepreneur, the reason we all talk about why your team is the most critical decision that you make, it's because you have chosen them for their ability to do something in the future. You've chosen them because of their expertise. You've chosen them because in the interview process, you saw their potential. And yet the entire nomenclature, like, oh my God, performance reviews. No, do not get me started about resumes and job descriptions. Equally awful. They do a terrible job of helping either the person trying to get the job or the person giving the job talk about the work. I'm like, start having potential reviews in your annual check-in. Very empowering, creates trust, everybody learns, reduces competition, all of the things. And so I come into teams really, and everybody goes through the potential process. And in the process, not only do they learn who they are and their unique contribution to an organization and get the confidence to get to the ballroom, to dance with the prince, et cetera, which is, as an entrepreneur, what you want for every member of your team. You wish that, and you just go, oh, stop asking me for permission. Bring your expertise to the table. Like, that's the thing. I'm like, oh, stop. It's okay. I like you already. How do you create that? But then also with each other, because I sat down and as I was building all of this programming out, I realized that the moments that I was not only at my best, but being my best was when 2 things were true. One, I really understood how I mattered in the organization and how I wanted to matter. So the whole, how are you providing value? And we all want that. And I was excited and curious about what I was going to do. That's when I was at my best. When my team, when my colleagues were killing it together, it's when not only did I know that for myself, but other people knew it about me, and I knew what everybody else brought to the table. and what their ambitions were and where they wanted to matter and what they were excited and curious in doing, because then it shifted every conversation from potentially competitive to collaborative. It meant that we all understood, like the whole, oh, I don't know why I don't get invited to the meetings. They should have had me in the meetings. No one ever worried about that. You got invited. Or even better, you could say, you don't need me at this meeting because you don't need this part of the bigger picture. And it actually optimizes for the space and work that this is why I talk about potentialism and bringing this into the workplace, because it optimizes for that as opposed to optimizing for productivity. Because when you optimize for potentialism, productivity happens. And if we optimize for potentialism, then boredom happens, competition happens, stuck happens, sabotage happens, all of the bad things happen. And, you know, I look at the future and I am such a tech optimist. And yeah, there are things that make me go a little, I don't think so. While I am heartbroken for a lot of the awful things that has happened from the pandemic, it has forced a hand in the world of business, especially in the white collar working space, that is going to transform how we work. And anybody who's sitting here going, well, this is the way it's going to look in the future, it's making stuff up. And so I sit here and say, well, hang on a second, there's going to be a whole new world. That moment of ambiguity that I experienced from moving from England to Texas. And I mean, well, technically we spoke the same language, not really. People, culture, how things are done, all of that is up for grabs. And you can either sit back and watch it all happen in front of you, or you can participate and help define it. And I just sit here and I go, I'm a definer to my core. And so then I come back and say, like, you can actually choose, like, this is the beauty of it. You actually get to choose the future you. And as somebody who's like, oh, should I be an entrepreneur? Should I be an entrepreneur? Should I be an entrepreneur? I sit here and I go, look, nobody can, like, what it looks like and what does the box look like is yours to choose. Because I've gotten to meet thousands of entrepreneurs, and every single one of them is different. But the ones who are having the most fun, really doing the most business, all the things, and it doesn't mean that things might not go sideways at some point, but the ones who are doing that are doing it on their own terms. And so I sit here and I go, like, the first question you want to have is kind of like Cinderella, like, what is your ball? Like, what do you want and what works for you? And then build that. Because I'll sit here and say, as the fairy godmother, if Cinderella had said, I want to go to a basketball game, I would have given her a different outfit. Equally fabulous, but a different outfit.
It's a great way to say it. Tell me, what do you think starting a business when you're over 50? Does that have like special benefits? Or what do you think are some of the challenges to that?
Sure. Well, so the benefits are, you give a hoot less. Somebody taught me once, I was going to say a much worse word, but I decided to be a bit more. Somebody once said, like, in your 20s, you're trying to figure out the rules. And in your 30s, you're trying to play by the rules. And in your 40s, you're like, whatever, I'm going to make up my own rules. In your 50s, you start get to play by your own rules. And I think that is, I think those descriptors, especially for women, have been incredibly true for me. I was like, oh yeah, that totally works for me. And it is like your, do I give a hoot meter kind of goes down. It doesn't mean that you're a nasty person or you don't have empathy, but you're like, am I willing to kind of make up my own playbook? Suddenly goes up. So I think that's incredibly liberating. I'd also say the benefit, like, there's a big part of me, and I've talked about how I was kind of a baby entrepreneur at six. I've always kind of wanted to start a thing, but the reality is the weird set of skills and weird experiences and weird adventures that I went on in my traditional career. I say that. And I did work. I worked for CBS. I worked for some really big companies. Gave me all of the ingredients to make up the thing that is me today. And if I hadn't had those experiences, like as an example, and this one was an eye-opener, I ran sales training for CBS for quite a long time. And at one point in that, got sent to Beijing to do sales training with the Beijing sales team, the Tokyo sales team, and the Seoul sales team at the same time. 4 different languages. I know how to say the number 8 in Mandarin. That is the extent of my Chinese. And I know how to say thank you, xie xie. That's it. It was bananas. I got a cultural lesson because we sat the Chinese and the Japanese teams next to each other. Bad idea. Learned that lesson very quickly. Like all of those things mean that I have customers all over the world because I got to do some really wonderful international work as a corporation. And so if I had gone on my entrepreneurial path at, I don't know, 25, I was a bit of a train wreck before 25, functional train wreck, but well, it would have been a terrible idea before 25. If I wouldn't have gotten those opportunity experience, would I have gotten other ones? Sure. But I don't think it would have put me on this path today. And I loved all of that work. I think the cons are, the isms are absolutely true. I mean, I'm super lucky because I was born and raised in England. I didn't see the sun for most of my life. And so, I managed to get a good skin situation. So a lot of people are like, wait, you're 50 something? And I go, mm-hmm. And so I win there. And I don't know what happened with the hair, something magical. But people do judge this as well, right? And when I talk about and I say the isms, because it could be ageism, it could be racism, it could be gender, it's all of the things. The reality is it is infinitely harder to recognize potential when it doesn't look and sound like you. It is not a character flaw to have bias unless you choose to do nothing about it. So if that is true, and it doesn't matter who you are, a straight white guy or not, which traditionally, yes, they are most of the people in the room making decisions about you, whether you are an entrepreneur or you're a white collar worker. That means you have to work a little harder. Is it fair? No. Does it make you better? Yes. And so I sit here and go, like, stop getting mad about the weaknesses and actually sit here and go, like, what objection am I trying to overcome here? So yeah, does that exist? Do I get cross regularly that people make fantastic assumptions about me because either I'm older or because I'm a woman or whatever? Yes. But then I also know that people make fantastic assumptions of me because I have a weird accent and sound a bit funny. I came to Texas with a very clipped British accent, and I realized very quickly that they thought I was extra clever because I sounded funny. And I was like, well, if you want to believe that, that's fantastic, because I will be as clever as you need me to be. That's that. When I talk about authenticity and appearance, it's understanding as humans that we are a complex combination of appearance and truth. And when you are both, and when you lean into both and understand both, you actually get to be more of you. And I think like that's the joy of being an over 50 entrepreneur, is the comfort in just saying, well, I am who I am, and that, like, we're not going to get over that is really wonderful.
Interesting. Think back to starting your business, and you said that you had gotten a contract fairly early on, is what I was guessing, because you a proposal.
Before there was even a tax EIN number from the state of California. Yeah.
So other than that, because that may have been partially the answer to my second question that I'm going to ask in a minute, but what were some of the steps that you took to create your new business? Did you build it around that contract and go forward, or what would you do?
No, well, so first of all, I went out, there's a ton of resources on what are the basics you need. And so I sat there and I said, like, what are the basics? So like understanding and talking to enough people to say, like, what kind of corporation do I want to set up? Am I going to be an LLC? Do I want to be an S Corp? Am I a C Corp? Like, I didn't understand I had an idea. And specifically, and especially for people who are transitioning from corporate America into normal entrepreneurship. Like, you know, the controller at your company, go talk to them. Go say, dude, can you explain me this? Unbelievable resource. You also know lots of lawyers at your company who you can go, how do you think about all of this? This is again why relationships are critically important, because I went out and asked a ton of questions about like, what were the basics? And it was get set up so you can, like, taxes, contracts, and your financial stuff were the three that I went and did. Other than that, I then literally started from there and said, like, how do we experiment? And every engagement, I'd say for the first year, was test and iterate, test and iterate, test and iterate. And so the program, as an example, you said, did I build it around the contract? I kept the contract as lean as possible, as absolutely lean as possible, so that I had the flexibility to go, oh, I don't want to do that again, or I do want to do that again, but still making sure like there was always an over deliver on what people were expecting, because that's just how I operate. So really figuring out those sort of things. And as I became a student of the entrepreneurial world, like I listened to podcasts like this one every single day. When I do my workout, I listen to podcasts at the same time, because I'm always like, well, what do I need to know about? How do I research things? There is one of the slightly terrifying parts about registering your company and getting a website up is you will find that absolutely everyone and their dog will try to start selling you stuff. And you'll get a lot of inbound, like, oh, let me help your business. Let me do this. I took some calls. I didn't. I was very curious. As I was looking at technology, I wouldn't necessarily choose, as an example, the best technology. I'd literally sit there and go, like, what are all the things I need? So as an example, I use Typeform for all of my surveys and Q&A tools, and not SurveyMonkey. Now, irony, I'm actually friends with the CEO of SurveyMonkey. I'm sure he'd be kind of horrified that I don't use his tool. Well, your tool's really expensive, and I got a budget, and it's way too fancy for what I need. And I'd probably have to hire somebody just to do the SurveyMonkey stuff, because it's got so much that it can do. Typeform does enough. And is there going to be a point in the future when we get big enough that I'm probably going to need to upgrade from Typeform to SurveyMonkey? Probably. The same thing with, like, I look at the suite of Adobe creative tools. They are amazing. And I do play with the young people stuff. I'm on TikTok all the time. And what these kids can do on TikTok with the Adobe suite just blows my mind. Not an artist. And so I use Canva, which makes me enough of an artist until, like, so we just hired our first fractional creative director a couple of weeks ago, because I'm all like, look, the Joanna hack the art together path is no longer good enough. And where we're going, what we're doing, I actually need somebody who is going to treat this like their baby, as opposed to me going, let's just put something together. You know, I'm a big fan of Xero as a financial platform. And so I looked at all of the different tools that I needed to be able to run my business, but I hold them all very lightly to say, is this working for what it is we're doing? Now, I run on the comfort with change and comfort with technology. I skew a little off the chart, and I recognize that about myself. You know, my team often push back and they're like, really, we thought we were doing this and now we're not doing it anymore. And I'm like, well, it didn't work. They are learning to throw away ideas comfortably. They're like, wait a second, direction. I'm like, not a direction change, just a refinement. So am I comfortable with that? And am I super comfortable with technology? Yes. And so do I think I have a bit of an advantage there? But if you're not, I sit here and go, I have learned more from the younger, I do a lot of reverse mentoring. So the younger people who are around me, I'm like, how do you do this? Like, it absolutely blows my mind, the kind of short video content people can do on TikTok. It's really clever. And so I went around and was all like, who knows somebody who's on TikTok, who's doing stuff on TikTok? Explain me. And then I'm like, how do you do this? Like, wait a second, you do all of your video editing on the phone? How do you do this? I can't do it that fast. Explain. And I have them tell me how they make the sausage. And when I understand how to make sausage, I then go, oh, well, I want that bit and I want that bit and I want that bit. And that one will work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This next question, you might have already given the answer, but let me ask it in case. And it's, how were you able to make the financial transition? I heard you say contract. And so
yeah,
that's how I did it as well, from my job to my.
Yeah. You start before you're ready. Yeah. So there were a couple of things. I looked at your question before we did this interview on that specific one. One, I gave myself really manageable goals, because as you have heard, I never actually made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And I still kind of even fight that label, right? Because I'm all like, well, really? And so when I very first started out, I did the normal math that you should do as you are managing your household. And I said, okay, I had a little bit of a buffer and I had a little bit of time. And I was like, okay, how much do I need to make? Not what do I want the company be making in 5 years from now? But I said, give myself 6 months. And I set myself a target that wasn't, oh my God, the world is going to explode. It was a target that would message to me that what I was offering people was something people wanted to buy. And so I made myself a really low target. And I said, okay, you are going to do this. And if you can hit that target by 6 months later, well, then that's a sign that you're on the right path. And I continued to do that. And yes, the pandemic basically made me go, I'm going to completely change that direction. But I continue to do that to this day. And I kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time. And that took away some of the panic and the whole, oh my God, I'm like completely shifting direction, because I know, I mean, as I said, it happened last week. I got it offered a job last week. I know that, especially somebody who came from kind of corporate America, that if I needed to go get a proper job again, I could, because I've maintained those relationships and I still talk to those folks. And if I was going to go for those jobs, would I say, oh, I took a year off to start a company? No, I'd be like, this is what I've been learning for the last year. It's been fantastic. Not only do you get me, but you get me extra, which is a lot. And so there's always the plan B is always there. But plan A kept on paying off. And I look at that on almost a 6 monthly basis, even today. And the numbers have gotten bigger over time. This is, I was lucky in working through hockey stick moments at startups. I got to see what crazy growth looked like really often. And so, decided to, instead of investing in the stock market or investing in real estate, invested in me, but said, like, what is the ROI that you're looking for? And I continue to do that. And that's with, well, I love him very much, probably the most expensive husband on the planet, because he's an adventure sailor and writer and goes out to sea on our sailboat for years. He was at sea on a 43-foot sailboat for basically 2 years, for the first 2 years of my company. So I was alone. And he kept on either practically sinking and or breaking really expensive equipment. And so I needed to fund that too. But we also made that decision together. And I do think when you're doing something like this, like, he and I have also been very aligned on what risks are we both taking, because he takes some insane and frankly quite terrifying risks that make me very scared, but I survive. And he looks at the risks I make and he says exactly the same thing, but we understand that we're actually supporting each other's ambitions. I practice what I preach quite a bit.
Did it have any other effects on your family life? Were there other family considerations?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like my actual family thought I had lost my mind. I love my actual family, and they are fantastically proud of me, but it took them a very long time to, I think they always believed, but they couldn't see that future for themselves. They thought it was so crazy that it seemed like, because they can't see it for themselves, they were a little scared for me. And when I talk about friends and family specifically, especially to other entrepreneurs, I always say, like, asking friends and family what they think about what you're doing is a risky path to walk down, because often they can't see what you can see. This is why, like, I'm a really big fan of joining community, finding your people, finding people who look and sound like you, because they can see what you can't, and they are also the ones in the weeds, and you can have those real conversations with. And like, part of what you're doing, I think, is amazing, because I hope that in watching this, somebody looks at me and goes, she's fabulous, but I could be that fabulous too. And how do you surround yourself with enough of those sorts of people? Because, you know, I love my mom very, very, very much, but her ambitions for me are not the same as my ambitions for me. And really, that's where the voices in your head, especially in that early stage, can be really difficult. And you just have to go, oh, I'm not going to listen to that. Although they will tell you. So that, yeah, the family structure is harder. You know, I am not a parent. And I have lots of friends who are parents who are entrepreneurs as well. And I think I would be doing a disservice to talk about what are the factors when you have people you have made in your life as well. You know, I'm a doggy parent. Does that count? No, I don't think so. Although I love her very much. And so I think there are factors that you have to consider, but it comes back to, you know, whether you are going to be an entrepreneur or whether you're going to work for somebody else, or work, I would actually prefer, with somebody else. We're still all making bets on our future self, and just being intentional about it and saying, like, what are the measures of success? Like, what are the markers? And it's not title, and it's not often, surprisingly, what's in the bank account, that are important, and figuring out what those are for you, so that you can then say, I'm going to start experiment. But I will say, like, it doesn't all need to be perfect and sorted out to start. Does not. You know, I've been in this business for 6 years now, and the presentation I did for Amanda at Microsoft 6 years ago, while the spirit is still there, the experience and what we do completely transformed. But that, you know, as I said, I've been working for startups for years, and there's not a company in the planet that has survived in the future that hasn't stuck to the spirit, but reinvented the future.
Interesting. Let me ask you one last question, and that is, what do you like best about your lifestyle?
Lots of things, but probably, can I have two?
You can have two. Yes.
I do love, like, I got a text this morning because one of my clients got the thing she wanted. She got her bowl, and I'm like, ugh. Like, literally is the thing that keeps me going. I usually run around the house a couple of times. The dog thinks I've lost my mind because I'm all like, ah. There is absolutely nothing I love more in the world than when somebody's dream comes true. And I get to see that a lot. And everybody's dream is dismal. And oh, it's the best. Like, I get to tell people why they are awesome for a living. Are you kidding me? It's so fantastic. That said, this life of being the owner of this business, for lack of a better term, means that I get to create the framework. And I am incredibly lucky to live in a place that backs up on hundreds of miles of federal parkland. And I have a big floofy dog who thinks I'm the bestest, because mostly I carry treats. And she and I go for anywhere from 4 to 6 miles every day. Outside, I forest bathe. And that time is where I have my best ideas, is where I work through problems, is where I center myself, is where all of the magic happens, is among the trees. And that is my favorite part of the day. Well, I mean, other than dessert, but yeah, that's what this being an entrepreneur allows me to do. Is nobody says you can't go take a hike at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, Joanna, I have had so much fun. I mean, I could just keep on going for a long time, but this has been great. Thank you so much for just sharing everything with us. And, I hope we have more talks in the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me as well. I hope this has inspired somebody to figure out what their path might be. And, if anything, go, oh, I could do this too, because I don't have any, well, I am the fairy godmother. I don't have any magic tools that I use. It's this thing up here that goes, what if? And when you get to, as an individual, when you get to manifest a what if, it is kind of magical. That is where it gets fun. So best of luck to everybody listening and or watching.
Thank you again.